Hello everybody. So I was reading some stuff on the internet earlier today and yesterday, mostly at the request of Jake, because Jake was like, hey Caleb, there's this thing called universal basic income. You should take a look at it. So I took a look at it. So if I understand how universal basic income is supposed to work, what happens is you increase taxes either for everybody or for specific industries or whatever, but you increase some taxes and then you just give everybody a set amount of money in the hopes that it kind of just like levels the playing field for everybody. And so the part that to me was incredibly interesting about this whole universal basic income sort of thing is that the amount of discussion there has been around it and people arguing on one side or the other, like for it or against it and why. So I wanted to just kind of go over some of the various positions on that and explain kind of my thoughts. So the first argument against universal basic income is that it will basically make itself invalid, because if you give everybody $1,000 more, everybody in the marketplace knows that everybody has $1,000 more, so they're going to just raise their prices by some amount that basically means that people having an extra $1,000 does nothing. So then we have the counter argument. The counter argument being that it doesn't do that, and the reason why it doesn't do that. And I want to point something out here, and it's a lot of times when people are talking about economic sort of things, they hold on to a principle and they just like assume that it applies all the way, all the time. And I've fallen into this trap myself. I study economics, and it's really interesting to me the way that people behave in relation to economics, because they make assumptions based on the severity of certain principles. So would inflation come into effect? Because that's what, everybody having more money, people raising their prices, that's commonly referred to as inflation. And the answer is yes, it would come into effect. But the thing about the inflation is it wouldn't nullify the $1,000. It would make it less effective than $1,000 now, but it would not make it completely ineffective. The idea being that $1,000 is some percentage of everybody's income currently. And so if you add $1,000 to somebody who's making $2,000 a month, that's a 50% increase. But if you add $1,000 to somebody who's already making $5,000 a month, that's what? I shouldn't do math on camera. But it's a much smaller increase than the 50% increase you would get from adding 1,000 to 2,000, 1,000 to 5,000. It's a less significant amount of money anyway. So you can argue either way that that inflation would have total effect or not have total effect. The evidence would suggest that it doesn't have total effect. And the evidence that I'm pulling that from is just some empirical data based on the permanent fund dividend here in Alaska, which is where everybody actually gets paid not a set amount, but it's an amount that everybody who lives in the state of Alaska for longer than a year, you can apply for the permanent portion of the permanent fund dividend, and it ends up being somewhere around $1,000 a year. Now, $1,000 a year is a lot less than $1,000 a month. I acknowledge that. And like I said, it's empirical data, so it's just what's been happening. I have no way of controlling the test or anything. But by and large, it does increase inflation here in Alaska, but at a rate that is lower than the actual purchasing power that money gives. So what that essentially means is that the people that are making more money actually are affected more, because they have more to lose from inflation going up, maybe? Or you could argue that, poor people are hurt worse by inflation because prices go up. It's a hard question. The other thing to keep in mind is that our market doesn't currently exist in a vacuum. As a nation, we have something to regulate inflation that's called the Federal Reserve, and they try to keep the inflation at a specified rate by managing the interest rates and whatnot. Do they do a perfect job? No. But whether or not you think they should be doing that, whether you think they do a good job, they are at least trying to manage that. And so if we saw a whole bunch of increase in inflation due to everybody getting $1,000 a month, you could argue that the Federal Reserve would try and, mitigate that as much as possible. And there's a purple flower! Now, there is a fair amount of argument that the government should just stay out of people's lives, not worry about this. That's kind of a discussion about the role of government, which is a completely different discussion. There's a lot of, kind of back and forth about that. There's back and forth about the amount of the inflation that would be impacted. There's also questions about, is it our responsibility as a nation to ensure that everybody has a similar way of life? And all of those are questions that I'm not going to even try to answer in this video because that would take way too long, and there's just no way. But the thing that I did want to say is that I feel like the universal basic income could, if implemented properly, serve as a better method of dealing with the welfare system than what we currently have. And if it were to be put in place, the focus of the welfare could shift from providing money for people to providing education for people. And I feel like that would be far more beneficial. That being said, I did say if it's implemented correctly, and I think. I have no way of guaranteeing this, and if it was implemented poorly, then we would have a lot of the issues that people bring up with it. And I guess my conclusion is that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this, and most of the opinions are valid in that they have some basis of fact or truth behind their argument. I feel like some people take it too far one way or the other, and some people just ignore arguments to the contrary. But my goal in bringing this up was to kind of just, share my thoughts and see what your responses might be in relation to it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you all for watching.